Hey guys, welcome back. So in part 4 of this series, we're going to discuss the individuals who make up the Tavistock Institute, the real power structures behind this institution along with so many others, as well as their intent and purpose. We always say they when discussing these agendas, but who are they? And what kind of influence do they actually have? They seem to literally get away with murder. They also seem above our reach, out of sight, frustratingly nebulous when it comes to taking action against them. However, they are in plain sight at events such as the Paris Air Show, the state opening of Parliament, and the swearing-in ceremony of the United States President. Unfortunately, the U.S. government is literally at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to the pecking order. The White House is basically akin to the Bob Baker Marionette Theater. So let's start at the very top, and then we'll trickle down to the NGOs and other clandestine agencies and organizations that refer to the top for approval and guidance, which in most cases isn't even really necessary, as these organizations aren't beholden to anyone or anything for the most part. It all begins with the Committee of 300, also known as the Olympians, which I briefly touched on in my first video of this series. You remember the ones who consider themselves gods and feel they've been granted the right to instill their will upon us. Yeah, those people. Well, the Committee of 300 is a global network consisting of individuals, royalty, and powerful elite families, most of whom you've probably never even heard of, except for maybe a few like Warren Buffett, Henry Kissinger, George Bush, Aldous Huxley, Ted Turner, the Vanderbilts, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, Cecil Rhodes, and maybe even PricewaterhouseCoopers, who's responsible for all accounting and auditing of the organizations and institutions that are under the direct influence of the Committee of 300. The Committee of 300 long ago decreed that there shall be a smaller, much smaller and better world. That is their idea of what constitutes a better world. The myriad of useless eaters consuming scarce natural resources were to be culled. Industrial progress supports population growth, thus it must be eliminated. This also called for an attack upon Christianity, the slow but sure disintegration of industrial nation-states, the destruction of hundreds of millions of people, referred to by the Committee of 300 as a surplus population, and the removal of any leader who dared stand in the way of their global planning to reach their mission of a new one-world government. The hierarchy starts with the Committee of 300. Then you have the Royal Institute of International Affairs, followed by the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. Below that is the Club of Rome, then NATO, then the U.S. military. Of course, each of these organizations have their own subcategories you can see. For instance, British intelligence, which oversees Interpol, Mossad, and the CIA, and other intelligence agencies. And yes, the CIA answers to the Crown, not the U.S. Constitution, as I was led to believe. It is very obvious today people walk in great darkness, mostly not caring or bothering to find out where their country is headed, firm in belief that it will always be there for them. This is the way the largest population group has been manipulated to react, and their attitude plays right into the hands of the secret government. They are counting on our maladaptive responses to govern our reactions to created events, and they will not be disappointed as long as we, as a nation, continue in the present way that we respond. That we are lost is clear to all who seek the truth, as unpleasant as it is. With President Bush Sr.'s Committee of 300 member and his no absolute morals guiding us, we blunder ahead as a lost nation. So what exactly is the end goal of the Committee of 300? It is a one-world government under their direct control, and they've done a fantastic job by succumbing society to what Tavistock Institute calls future shocks, whose future is now, and we are so numbed by one cultural shock after another that to protest seems like a futile gesture, and therefore, logically, we think it does no good. Like George Orwell's 1984, Wells' account is a mass appeal for a one-world government. Summarized, the intent and purpose of the Committee of 300 is to bring to pass the following conditions: a one-world government and one-unit monetary system under permanent non-elected hereditary oligarchists who self-select from among their numbers in the form of a feudal system as it was in the Middle Ages. In this one world entity, population will be limited by restrictions on the number of children per family, diseases, wars, famines, until 1 billion people who are useful to the ruling class in areas which will be strictly and clearly defined remain as the total world population. There will be no middle class, only rulers and the servants. All laws will be uniform under a legal system of world courts, practicing the same unified code of laws backed up by a one world government police force and a one world unified military to enforce laws in all former countries where no national boundaries shall exist. The system will be on the basis of a welfare state. Those who are obedient and subservient to the one world government will be rewarded with the means to live. Those who are rebellious will simply be starved to death or be declared outlaws, thus a target for anyone who wishes to kill them. Privately owned firearms or weapons of any kind will be prohibited. Only one religion will be allowed, and that will be in the form of a one world government church, which has been in existence since 1920. Satanism and Luciferianism and witchcraft shall be recognized as legitimate one world government curricula in no private or church schools. All Christian churches have already been subverted, and Christianity will be a thing of the past in the one world government. To induce a state where there is no individual freedom or any concept of liberty surviving, there shall be no such thing as republicanism, sovereignty, or rights residing with the people. National pride and racial identity shall be stamped out, and in the transition phase it shall be subject to the severest penalties to even mention one's racial origin. Each person shall be fully indoctrinated that he or she is a creature of the one world government with an identification number clearly marked on their persons, so as to be readily accessible, which identifying number shall be in the master file of the NATO computer in Brussels, Belgium, subject to instant retrieval by any agency of the one world government at any time. The master files of the CIA, the FBI, state and local police agencies, IRS, IMA, Social Security shall be vastly expanded and form the basis of personal records of all individuals in the United States. Marriage shall be outlawed, and there shall be no family life as we know it. Children will be removed from their parents at an early age and brought up by wards as state property. Such an experiment was carried out in East Germany under Erich Honecker, when children were taken away from parents considered by the state to be disloyal citizens. Women will be degraded through the continued process of women's liberation movements. Free sex shall be mandatory. Failure to comply at least once by the age of 20 shall be punishable by severe reprisals against her person. Self-abortion shall be taught and practiced after 2 children are born to a woman. Such records shall be contained in the personnel file of each woman in the one world government's regional computers. If a woman falls pregnant after she has previously given birth to 2 children, she shall be forcibly removed to an abortion clinic for such an abortion and sterilization to be carried out. Pornography shall be promoted and be compulsory showing in every theater of cinema, including homosexual and lesbian pornography. The use of recreational drugs shall be compulsory, with each person allotted drug quotas, which can be purchased at one world government stores throughout the world. Mind control drugs, which will be expanded and usage becomes compulsory. Such mind control drugs shall be given in food and or water supplies without the knowledge and or consent of the people. Kind of like fluoride in the United States. Drug bars shall be set up, run by one world government employees, where the slave class shall be able to spend their free time. In this manner, the non-elite masses will be reduced to the level and behavior of controlled animals with no will of their own, and easily regimented and controlled, kind of like today's society. The economic system shall be based upon the ruling oligarchical class, allowing just enough foods and services to be produced to keep the mass slave labor camps going. All wealth shall be aggregated in the hands of the elite members of the Committee of 300. Each individual shall be indoctrinated to understand that he or she is totally dependent upon the state for survival. The world shall be ruled by Committee of 300 executive decrees, which become instant law. Boris Yeltsin is using the Committee of 300 decrees to impose the committee's will on Russia as a trial run. Courts of punishment and not courts of justice shall exist. An industry to be totally destroyed along with nuclear-powered energy systems. Only the Committee of 300 members and their elites shall have the right to any of the Earth's resources. Agricultural shall be solely in the hands of the Committee of 300, with food production strictly controlled. As these measures begin to take effect, large populations in the cities shall be forcibly removed to remote areas, and those who refuse to go shall be exterminated in the manner of the one world government experiment carried out by Pol Pot in Cambodia. Euthanasia for the terminally ill and the aged shall be compulsory. No cities shall be larger than a predetermined number as described in the work of Calgary. Essential workers will be moved to other cities if the one they are in becomes overpopulated. Other non-essential workers will be chosen at random and sent to underpopulated cities to fill quotas. At least 4 billion useless eaters shall be eliminated by the year 2050 by means of limited wars, organized epidemics of fatal rapid-acting diseases, and starvation. Sounds familiar? Energy, food, and water shall be kept at subsistence levels for the non-elite, starting with the white populations of Western Europe and North America, and then spreading to other races. The population of Canada, Western Europe, and the United States will be decimated more rapidly than any other continent until the world's population reaches a manageable level of 1 billion, of which 500 million will consist of Chinese and Japanese races, selected because they are people who have been regimented for centuries and who are accustomed to obeying authority without question. From time to time, there shall be artificially contrived food and water shortages and medical care to remind the masses that their very existence depends on the goodwill of the Committee of 300. After the destruction of housing, auto, steel, and heavy goods industries, there shall be limited housing, and industries of any kind allowed to remain shall be under the direction of NATO's Club of Rome, as shall all scientific and space exploration development, limited to the elite under the control of the Committee of 300. Space weapons of all former nations shall be destroyed along with nuclear weapons. All essential and non-essential pharmaceutical products, doctors, dentists, and healthcare workers will be registered in the Central Computer Data Bank, and no medicine or medical care will be prescribed without the express permission of regional controllers responsible for each town, city, and village. The United States will be flooded by peoples of alien cultures who will eventually overwhelm white America. People with no concept of what the United States Constitution stands for, or who will, in consequence, do nothing to defend it, and in whose minds the concept of liberty and justice is so weak as to matter little. Food and shelter shall be the main concern. No central bank except the Bank of International Settlements and the World Bank shall be allowed to operate. Private banks will be outlawed. Pay for work performed shall be under a uniform predetermined scale throughout the one world government. There shall be no wage disputes allowed, nor any diversion from the standard uniform scales of pay laid down by the one world government. Those who break the law will be instantly executed. There shall be no cash or coinage in the hands of the non-elite. All transactions shall be carried out by means of a debit card, which shall bear the identification number of the holder. Any person who in any way infringes the rules and regulations of the Committee of 300 shall have the use of his or her card suspended for varying times according to the nature and severity of the infringement. Such persons will find when they go to make purchases that their card is blacklisted, and they will no longer be able to obtain services of any kind. Attempts to trade old coins, that is to say silver or gold coins of previous and now defunct nations, shall be treated as capital punishment, subjected to the death penalty. All such coinage shall be required to be surrendered within a given time, along with guns, rifles, explosives, and automobiles. Only the elite and one world government high-ranking functionaries will be allowed private transport, weapons, coinage, and automobiles. If the offense is a serious one, the card will be seized at the checking point where it is presented. Thereafter, that person shall not be able to obtain food, water, shelter, and employment, medical services, and shall be officially listed as an outlaw. Large bands of outlaws will thus be created, and they will live in regions that best afford sustenance, subject to being hunted down and shot on sight. Persons assisting outlaws in any way whatsoever shall likewise be shot. Outlaws who fail to surrender to the police or military after a declared period of time shall have a former family member selected at random to serve prison term in their stead. Rival factions and groups such as Arabs and Jews and African tribes shall have differences magnified and be allowed to wage wars of extermination against each other under the eyes of NATO and United Nations observers. The same tactics will be used in Central and South America. These wars of attrition shall take place before the takeover of the one world government and shall be engineered on every continent where large groups of people with ethnic and religious differences live, such as the Sikhs, Muslim, Pakistanis, and the Hindu Indians. Ethnic and religious differences shall be magnified and exasperated, and violent conflicts as a means of settling their differences shall be encouraged and fostered. All information services and print media shall be under the control of the one world government. Regular brainwashing control measures shall be passed off as entertainment in the manner in which it was practiced and became a fine art in the United States. Youths removed from disloyal parents shall receive special education designed to brutalize them. Youth of both sexes shall receive training to qualify as prison guards for the one world labor camp system. The Committee of 300 has long ago perfected plans to destabilize civilization as we know it, some of which plans were made known by Zbigniew Brzezinski in his classic work, The Technotronic Era, and the works of Arleo Pecci, who founded the Club of Rome, especially in his book, The Chasm Ahead. In The Chasm Ahead, Pecci spelled out Committee of 300 plans to tame man, whom he called the enemy. Pecci quoted what Felix Dzerzhinsky said to Sidney Riley at the height of the Red Terror when millions of Russians were being murdered. Why should I concern myself with how many people die? Even the Christian Bible says, what is man that God should be mindful of him? For me, men are nothing but a brain at one end and a ship factory at the other. With the advent of the personal computer, we have deprived ourselves of our familiar environment. The United States has gone through a period of intense trauma, such as has never been visited upon any other nation in the history of the world, and the worst is yet to come. Everything is going according to what Tavistock ordered and what the social scientists at Stanford mapped out. Times do not change, they are made to change. All changes are pre-planned and come as a result of careful action. We had been changed gradually at first, but now the pace of change is picking up. This is part of the concept of social change forced upon Americans, which Harman and the Club of Rome said would make for severe trauma and a great building up of pressure. The social upheavals that have taken place since the advent of Tavistock, the Club of Rome, and NATO will continue in the U.S. for as long as the limit of absorption is ignored. Nations are made up of individuals, and like individuals, there is a limit to their ability to absorb change, no matter how robust they may be. This psychological truth was well proven by the Strategic Bombing Survey, which called for saturation bombing of German worker housing. This project was the work of Prudential Insurance Company, and no one doubts that Germany suffered its defeat because of this operation. Many of the scientists who worked on that project are working on saturation bombing of America, or they have passed on, leaving their skilled techniques in the hands of others who followed behind them. If you've been paying attention, you'll notice most, if not all, of these tactics are already in motion. We're witnessing the destruction of the banking system, the digital currency, women's liberation, sexual degeneracy, destruction of the nuclear family, the legalization of drug use, the subversion of churches and places of worship, pushing vaccines and transgender ideologies, the Canadian truckers having their bank accounts seized, the privatization of car ownership by 2030, the buying up of land, explosions of food processing plants, the railroad derailments. The list goes on. It's so important that we stop letting these people control our minds and unite as a society. The more people wake up, and they are, the more intense their efforts get, because they are way too close to turn back now. We are collaborating with the Committee of 300 for our own downfall and our own enslavement. So please, share this video far and wide and get the word out, and let's stop fighting with each other and unite and try to fight back. All right, thanks for watching.